Hello, in this video I'll show you how to place and fill your raised garden bed. This is the second part in a series about raised bed gardening. First, you need to determine the best place in your yard to place your raised garden bed based on the sunlight exposure and the moisture content. I'll be planting mostly vegetables and herbs in my raised garden bed, so I'm placing these in an area with direct sunlight. I'm also placing them in an area of a yard that doesn't flood or hold a lot of water when it rains. The last consideration is since I have two garden beds, I'm placing them in an orientation so I can still access all the way around both beds. With the location of the beds determined, it's time to prepare the yard. I started off by placing the beds where I want them to be, and then marking the edges of the beds with a shovel so that I know later where to dig. After I have the garden bed location marked, I use a shovel just to scratch off the top layer of grass and dirt from this area. There are a few reasons that I'm digging into the ground to place my raised garden bed. One reason is because the area that I wanted to place my raised garden bed isn't level. Leveling out the ground is important to make sure that your raised garden bed is resting securely on the ground and doesn't have any odd stress on certain areas of the frame. Additionally, it's more aesthetically pleasing to look at. Another reason that I'm digging out the grass and top layer of dirt is so that the grass doesn't compete with the roots of the vegetables and herbs that I'm going to plant. I'll be saving the dirt and grass that I dig out here and adding it into my compost pile. There are a couple other ways to kill off the grass that's in this area, but digging it out was my preferred method. One other method is to place landscaping fabric over the grass to kill it off. The dead grass can then be left and the nutrients can go into the soil of the raised garden bed. However, it can take a couple of weeks for this to fully die. Another option is to place the landscaping fabric down to kill off the grass and put the raised garden bed directly over top of the fabric. I didn't choose to use this method because I didn't want to have anything blocking the roots of the vegetables I was planting in the event that they needed to grow deeper than the 10 inches of my raised garden bed. A final option is to use a chemical spray to kill off the grass and weeds in this area, but I didn't want any chemicals to be in the soil where I'm planting vegetables and herbs. Once I have the grass and top layer of dirt removed from this area, I bring the raised garden bed frame back. Then I check for level on both the long walls and the short walls of the garden bed. I use a spade to dig out some of the high spots so that the bed will sit level. The dirt that I dig out here, I just move to another area so it can still be used as dirt in the raised garden bed. Then I check for level again. I just removed the high spots of the soil and checked for level, but there's inevitably going to be some low spots of the soil too. Before I can start filling the raised garden bed, I fill in any of the low spots to make sure that the garden bed is fully supported all the way around the frame. I use the dirt that I just dug out of this area to fill in these gaps. I check for level one final time, and now it's time to start filling the raised garden beds. The dirt that you should use to fill your raised garden bed depends on the area that you live in. Topsoil is typically the cheapest thing to use to fill a raised garden bed, but different regions have different levels of nutrients in the soil. The region that I live in has a lot of clay in the soil and not as many nutrients as other regions, so I have to supplement with some soil from the store. About 30% of the raised garden bed soil will be made with topsoil for my beds. I'll do another 30% that's garden soil from the store, and a final 30% that's compost. The supplemental soil that I bought from the store is specific for vegetables and herbs, and it has some compost in it. If you live in a region that has a lot more nutrients in the topsoil, you can use a mix of 50% topsoil and 50% compost. I add the topsoil, garden soil, and compost in alternating layers so I can mix everything together easier. I top everything off with about an inch layer of mushroom compost. I only filled the garden beds about 2/3 of the way full because it was still another 2 weeks before I was able to plant the first plants. This was based on the last frost date of the region that I live in. I waited to finish filling the garden beds until closer to the plant date so that the soil wouldn't lose a lot of nutrients while sitting in direct sun. I watered the soil that's already in the garden beds before adding additional soil. I only needed to add a bit of soil to get this soil level to be about an inch or two underneath the very top edge of the raised garden frame. I just used a bag of garden soil for this. Then I spread about an inch of mushroom compost on the top of both garden beds. You can fill your raised garden bed early like I did and top it off with nutrients right before planting, or you can fill the entire garden bed right before planting. Either way, I do still suggest to top this off with mushroom compost. Now that the garden beds are filled, our next step is to plant. Thanks for watching this video on how to place and fill your raised garden beds. Up next, you can watch a video on how to plant your raised garden beds. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and as always, like and subscribe to see more content.